And good morning. We are back here at 7:07 a.m., 34 degrees in the city, and as promised, we have Lubbock Police Chief Greg Stevens in the house this morning. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You got all the crime solved and all the criminals in jail?
We tried to wrap it all up last night. There's still some stragglers out there, so still got a lot of work to do.
But you're looking for them.
We are. We're still pressing forward, trying to solve it all.
Well, I think the big question is the snowstorm. Golly,
Sure.
we had hundreds of auto accidents in slick streets, and I know you guys were working overtime. I was driving down the loop here just a couple of days ago, and there's a collision center over there on the loop near Slide Road. There was cars lined up out in the street,
and a lot of those, a lot of people, they just don't report if they slide off, hit a guardrail or hit something. They move on and they don't. So we had 183 reported wrecks to us between 12:01 Saturday morning, so just after midnight Friday night, Saturday morning, all the way until I believe 9 a.m. yesterday. It was 183 reported wrecks, which really was fewer than we sort of anticipated.
Yeah.
I think we had fewer during this snowstorm than what we typically see during this event, and I attribute that a couple things. One, the communication piece that our folks were putting out, they just really did a bang-up job getting the word out. But then I attribute that to I can't say enough how much I appreciate. One, it was on the weekend too, but Lubbock drivers staying home, and our citizens recognizing, hey, there's a lot of snow out there. If you didn't need to travel, wasn't an absolute necessity to get on the roads, people didn't, and they stayed home. We saw a lot less traffic, which meant a lot fewer accidents. Didn't tie up our resources, and so it's got to attribute to that as well. We had a lot fewer crashes this time.
The city, in fact, we had the city manager on the radio show. They did an excellent job this time of getting the word out about what they were doing to prepare for this storm, because we knew it was coming, and they did a great job, I think.
So the key things. There's a couple things that make a big difference in this, and first and foremost is you got to have a plan, and that plan was created and sort of put into place back in January of 2017, and it's been exercised a number of plans. But what we also know is a plan is only as good as what the paper it's written on, unless you are able to execute that plan and not leave resources on the table, not leave them in a warehouse, but to bring everything you have to bear and stagger them appropriately so that you have ones in reserve that you can pull out at the appropriate times. And that was some of the big key things. And those resources include your public information piece. And I can't say enough, again, how great that worked out. And that's PIOs, ours, the police department. We've got, I can't say enough about the people that we have. We have two, Tiffany and Casey, that just do a great job day in and day out. But also you've got the fire department's PIOs, the city's PIOs, LP&Ls. They're all in one room during this event, and they've got their heads together, and they're on social media. They're talking with the regular media. They're on the phones. I mean, they're doing everything they can do to get the word out to make sure that people, however you get your news, whether you get it mostly in the paper, you get it on social media, you hear it on the radio, wherever you get it, they're trying to get as much information out as possible so that people know, if there's road closures, what the weather updates are, everything that we're doing so that people can have good and full knowledge. And they really hit an absolute home run on this deal.
Yeah, I agree.
You also have the new Lubbock Alert.
And that's a big key thing,
I was getting reminders every single morning or overnight. Hey, it's going to freeze back over.
Well, and
be careful.
You're exactly right. And so not only were they just hitting on all cylinders with the LBK alert, but I can't remember the whole number, but hundreds more signed up during the event. And so it's a solid system. It's working well, and not just for this, but people always ask about, what about severe weather alerts? Do we need sirens? Do we need this? And I'm not going to say it's a replacement or not. It certainly is a solution that more people, are going to get it ahead of time, and it's worked great so far. They continue to use it for everything from a 5 p.m. traffic wreck during sunny weather on the loop to warn people to go around, stay out of the area, to a dangerous subject we're looking for, all the way to this snowstorm. And I know if we have severe weather in terms of tornadoes or anything like that, that LBK alert system is going to be the go-to system that we use. And again, it's a great asset that we've got.
Well, and traffic investigations. I've noticed that
Sure.
I get alerts saying, hey, this road's closed because of a traffic investigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And
So how has traffic been a lot worse since during the holiday season here in Lubbock? Do we get a lot more people running around here?
So we do, because remember, Lubbock is the hub of the plains, and that's everything from agriculture, education, medical stuff, but also it's our shopping hub. From small towns, eastern New Mexico, all the way out as far away. You get close to Abilene. People, some go towards the Metroplex, but a lot of people come to Lubbock to shop, and so yeah, the holidays bring in a lot more traffic. But I tell you, our road system is good. It's a city manager was talking. I was listening to him at an event the other day, and it reminded me, when he was an intern here, he talked about the big model of what was at that time called the East-West Freeway. And I remember that model. I was a young patrolman, and I remember seeing it in City Hall, and I looked at it and I thought, man, what a great idea if we could ever get that. If we had a freeway that went east and west, and a lot of people were kind of negative on it and said, that'll never happen. And that's what would someday become the Marcia Sharp Freeway. And it did come to fruition. And when he was mentioning that during a speech he was giving, I thought, I remember that model and how awesome that would be. Well, sure enough, we have that now. And truly, if you look at our freeway system, decades ago, there was some genius behind the loop, connecting what is an inner loop and then having that east-west freeway, having the interstate. We manage traffic really well, and it's not that hard to get around in Lubbock. And we always joke around it. People say we don't have a rush hour, we have the rush minute, in the evening. And so, as Lubbock grows, we're going to have more and more congestion. And I think if we do our part to stay ahead of that, we look towards the new outer loop, Loop 88. If we can continue to think proactively, even during the holidays and these cyclic events, whether it's the fair or whatever it is that brings people into the hub of the plains, for whatever reason, agricultural, medical stuff, shopping, we stay ahead of that, and we're always going to enjoy pretty decent traffic circumstances. And so my piece of that is to have good, solid traffic enforcement through education, through warnings, and through enforcement, through writing tickets to make sure that we can keep traffic accidents down. And, for a while, we remained in the top 10 for fatalities and serious accidents. And we're not right now. We've been able to push ourselves out through, I think, our efforts, but also through having a good, solid, system of freeways and roadways and good maintenance. And one of the things the city's doing is making sure that we get to a point of pay-as-you-go, using cash for street maintenance so we don't get behind on that. Having good roads is good for commerce. It's good for our city. And so that's a great point.
So I don't want to nitpick on every little, because you always see drivers and it's irritating. But one thing I do see a lot lately, and I don't know if it's becoming more of a problem or less of a problem since the law came out, but it's texting and driving, or even I've seen people on Facebook and driving around.
I know.
So is the Lubbock Police Department seeing more of that, and are they able to do anything about kind of slowing that down? It's a
challenging law to enforce, and we do see it a lot, and the officers they address it, and of course they're expected to, and I've actually addressed it a couple of times. I've stopped a car and said, "Hey, listen, I saw you back there on your phone. Clearly, you were texting. It's not safe. Could I ask you to not do that?" The problem with enforcing, of course, is there's a lot of exceptions. A lot of points in the law where you can use your phone, and there's some benefits. I mean,
GPS,
you get
music.
GPS, music, things like that, and there's this. I guess this is a quote that I got out of a textbook, actually, when I was working on a master's degree at Tech, is it says that, how do we leverage the benefits and the kind of the awesomeness of technology while coping with its inherent distractions? Yeah. And that's whether it's in business or whatever it is. I don't think any of us want to go back to the day and age before smartphones, because I don't know how you find your favorite restaurant in a bigger city than when you're traveling, right? or how do you get to your hotel in a congested area? Yeah. So, but nonetheless, it brings with it distractions and dangers, and so it's finding that right balance, and it takes a lot of personal responsibility and accountability.
We got to take a break, Chief, and we'll be right back. We're visiting with the Lubbock Chief of Police Greg Stevens this morning. Some interesting information. Again, if you'd like to have a Chief answer a question, send us a text message at 806-680-2790. Back with more after this. And we're back here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin, and with us in the studio this morning is Lubbock Police Chief Greg Stevens. Got a lot of texters this morning, and We haven't
hopefully
even.
they're not driving.
Yeah, well, let's hope they're not, Chief. But we've got a long list of questions that we haven't even got to. But we do want to run through these because these are people who. But give us a short answer.
All right, I got you.
We got a lot of ground to cover yet. So what can you do about people not pulling over to the right and stopping for emergency response vehicles?
It's problematic, and typically you can't stop them because you're going to the emergency. Officers will try to stop them if they see someone not pulling over for a fire truck, but the law does say you have to pull over to the right.
To the right
and stop your car. If it's problematic, and we teach drivers, teach police officers, and fire trucks, firefighters to just do your best to avoid people and to drive defensively.
Yeah,
it's with that. One thing I did see a police officer, it's not quite the same thing, but now when that law first came out that said you had to slow down, I think it's 20 miles an hour if you're going around a police officer that's pulled over, or you have to get in that other lane. The police officer, there was a police officer that was actually stopping people for that and then stopping the next person for that. He wasn't giving tickets. He was just telling people that this is now the law. You need to be careful.
DPS heads those up, has those operations up, and will assist those folks. But they do tickets now.
Okay,
it's an operation.
We have another texter that says, "Is it legal to use the left turn lane as an on ramp on our large streets? Those people drive me crazy."
It is not legal. You cannot do that. You cannot turn into the left lane to wait on traffic to go by. That left turn lane is for left turns only.
And we have another texter.
So on Frankfurt,
I think asked the same question. So, what is the law for using the turning lane to merge into traffic?
It is illegal.
It is illegal. Okay. Texter says that I think the chief is doing a great job, but can he tell us how we stand with murders this year as compared to last?
Well, I know we've had 14. I'd have to look on how many we've had last year. I'll tell you the Lubbock averages, and I always hate to talk about it like this because it sounds inhumane to refer to it in statistical terms because these are murders. These are victims of murder and their families. It's a horrible thing for them, I know, going through. But Lubbock has an average of 12 to 13 murders every year, and so we've had 14 so far this year.
So we're about on par.
Yeah, about on par. Yeah. We've had years with as few as 6. We've had, in my time over the last decade, we've had some years with as many as 18. But so we're about on par right now.
Are most of them domestic? In other words, they're like in the household.
I'll say that several of them drugs are. Several of them are. All of them. We rarely ever have a random act of violence. Okay. They're always to put
Another texter says, "What is Chief Stevens' true thoughts on civil asset forfeiture?"
So I'll tell you, I think that it's a law that can be abused if there's not a lot of supervision and a lot of oversight. What we for us, and I'll tell you my position on it. There needs to be a criminal charge alongside of that. I'm not a fan of situations where there is a seizure without criminal charges.
Yeah.
And that are filed commensurate with that. Now, what happens a lot of times is the criminal charge is either defeated or is dismissed, but the asset forfeiture goes through. And I can accept those. What I don't support is where a criminal charge is never filed, but only the asset forfeiture is filed. I don't agree with that
because it seems like you're just wanting
the
assets.
Yeah, that's right. You're doing mercenary work.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I know that we're driving some new police cars, some Mustang police cars that I think were purchased with asset forfeiture.
I want to say 2 of them were, and one of them was a regular vehicle replacement, or it could have been 2 and 1 the other way around. But at least one of them
that was asset forfeiters that bought at least one of those cars.
So are you all up to 4 Mustangs now?
3.
3. Okay.
Yeah. Most of the public thinks there's a dozen or more because they do a lot of work. They're doing a lot of good traffic
and they're very noticeable compared to your police officers.
We got time for one more quick question before we go to break. And so, what about the people that pass the school buses with the stop signs out?
That's highly illegal. It's a very high fine for that, and something that we watch for. And a lot of buses, I think, are beginning to put cameras on them so that charges can be filed at a later time.
That would be very easy to run over a child.
It would be. It's a dangerous thing, and if anything, we just encourage people, hey, You get around a school bus, take your time because the kids are not paying attention.
That's
you know
right.
that. And
They're
the bus
kids.
driver can only do so much from the driver's seat of the bus. So it really becomes incumbent upon the drivers.
Well, again, good response this morning from our listeners, asking a lot of interesting questions. And again, we've got a break coming up. We're going to have to hold the chief over. We've got a whole list of other questions we want to run by after this. But again, if you would like to get a question to the chief, 806-680-2790 is our text number. Feel free to text us your questions. It is, again, 32 degrees this morning, 61 the forecast high, and Ron's saying it's going to be a beautiful day. He didn't mention the wind, did he? And we are back here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And again, Lubbock Chief of Police Greg Stevens with us this morning answering your questions. And we need to get caught up with the text. Chief, we have a texter that says 34th Street is a raceway. Maybe speed limit signs and more police?
You know, I'm not going to disagree with you there. It's one of the areas where we could probably do more work. You know, with there's another. I go back to things I learned in school. Of course, I try to bring stuff from the Navy, from long law enforcement career, and from education. One of the things I learned in an economics class is the allocation of scarce resources that all have alternative uses. And so, how many people I have on traffic versus detectives versus, canine and whatever. I've got to allocate those resources out. I'd love to put more people on traffic. And so we have limited resources that do traffic enforcement. We know that 34th Street, people drive faster than the speed limit that's there. It's 35 miles per hour for virtually the whole stretch from the interstate all the way out to Slide Road. And it's pretty well posted. I'm not going to say you wouldn't need more speed limit signs, but it's hard to miss the speed limit signs that are there. The way we send those officers out is we take a good hard look. We try to avoid fishing holes where the officers know they could just write a bunch of tickets. Where we get more bang for the dollar is where do we have all the wrecks, and we do kind of a hot spots approach, and we pull the data and the statistics that show us where the fatalities are occurring or where the wrecks are happening. And we do have some wrecks on 34th, but not as many as we have, in other areas of town. And so we do enforcement on 34th, but the traffic officers, the Mustangs, the motorcycles, and a few other assets are focused in areas where we have a lot more traffic accidents, trying to prevent deaths and injuries and property damage. And so again, if I had more resources, we'd do more on 34th to slow traffic down to try to prevent ever getting to the point where there's hot spots on 34th.
So y'all are going to get 10 more officers next year, right? Over the year, allocated budget wise.
If my goal is to try to add 10 officers each year. That depends on population growth. It depends on how well we're doing in recruiting and things like that. But so far, we're able to fill vacant positions. Every time we add some, we fill those positions, and so each year what we do is we look at how many officers it would take to keep up with population growth so we don't go backwards, and then how many we can expand by. And for last year's budget, we had to add 4 officers in order to just stay up with population growth, or we would have fewer per 1,000 residents. And so adding those 4 kept us even. And if you want to expand the department, which is a goal of us, of the city, and of elected officials, that's how we came up with 10. That more than doubles the growth. Now, we probably need closer to 500 officers. We have a budget strength of 453 right now. But you can only add so many without raising taxes, without doing those kinds of things. So that's the plan.
Well, Chief, I know that you've been working on a new homicide unit. How's that coming along?
We can check that box off. One of the things when I first took over, Kelly Rowe and I met, and we talked about doing a couple of joint units. We went with the DA's office, and what we know is criminals don't care about jurisdictional lines, so we had to refocus and not worry so much about staying in our lanes and take a collaborative approach. And the 2 big areas were narcotics, kind of special operations focus with gang violence and drug crimes and things like that. So one arm of that was what is now the TAG unit and the HIDA unit. And so that kicked off pretty early, and the sheriff's office really kind of heads that up. We're very involved in that. We have a lot of people committed to it, and that's been going well now for a couple of years. The other idea, the other unit, we've been working on is to have a homicide unit or a major crimes unit. What we know is when a body is found out on a desolate county road, good chances that person was killed inside the city. And we saw these cases over and over. In fact, the first homicide of this year was Camadron Jordan. He was found out in the county but murdered in the city. And so that happens over and over again. The county has a few, a couple of homicides each year. We have several each year. And so we wanted to join those forces as well and investigate those crimes together. And so we created what's now just passed council this last meeting. It's the Lubbock Metropolitan Special Crimes Unit. It's headed by an LPD lieutenant and an LPD supervisor. It's got investigators from our agency and the sheriff's office, and it's supported by forensics teams from both agencies. And it will investigate any homicides, any kind of death investigations, child deaths. Also, it'll investigate officer-involved shootings that occur with the county or with us, what we term crimes of special circumstance. So anytime a police officer is suspected of a crime, a politician, any kind of high-profile figure, and really anything else that the sheriff or I believe require the special skills that these officers could bring to the table, we can assign that out to the unit.
Can we get you some jurisdiction up in Washington, D.C.?
No.
There's a list of people I'd like you to go arrest.
I wanted to specifically exclude those things from but nonetheless, it's a great unit. They're up and running.
That's great. But that brings up an interesting question that came to mind. The Zoe Campos situation.
Yes, sir.
That young man that was arrested for her murder 11 years ago, wasn't it? I think.
She went missing in 2013.
13. So 5 years ago. Oh, okay. What happened on that deal? Did he just talk to somebody? Or?
Well, I'll be cautious about that. I still got to go to trial probably someday, and so we and I've never liked the term cold cases. We keep them open; they're always assigned, and so we trade them between investigators so that fresh eyes get on each case. The detective that had it last, the one that closed it out, he looked at it and realized that this particular suspect has never been fully excluded. Was
he a boyfriend or?
He was, and so the detective was able to develop more information, and we were able to strategically get him in touch with some folks. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. And information was developed, and then through awesome investigative work.
Somebody talked.
And people always do. Yeah. Certainly, eventually, someone will talk about it. And when you talk to a couple of people that are willing to talk to us, that'll break a case wide open.
So did he live in this home over here by Lowry Field? Or
he did, where she was found in the backyard.
And he buried her in his backyard?
He did.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, we had an officer in Slayton, I've got the story, I believe, that shot a couple of dogs. Do we run into situations? I've got to say, well, I'll tell you what. Let's come back and we'll talk more later. We've got to take a quick break right now. Back with more of Lubbock Police Chief Greg Stevens after this. And we're back here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And again, Lubbock Police Chief Greg Stevens. We're talking about the dogs incident down in Slayton yesterday where police officers had to shoot a couple of pit bulls. Do you guys run onto that very often in police work?
It's probably more common than you would realize. Our policy is pretty clear that if you have an aggressive animal that poses a danger to you or to the public, it's shooting a dog is an option that you've got. We do our best to try to contain the animal, let animal control come and deal with it. But ultimately, we're not going to let an aggressive dog attack another person or one of the officers.
Yeah, we let's see. What do you got coming up? Do you have anything?
Well, I was the one thing I had talked about asking was unmarked cars. I saw someone get pulled over by an unmarked car, and so I was just wondering if I guess some jurisdictions do, but do y'all use unmarked cars for just normal traffic stops?
We do not use them on a regular basis for normal traffic stops. Now, I'm going to venture to say, probably a third or more of the department regularly drives unmarked cars. Like my car is unmarked. All the detectives have unmarked cars. and they use those for detective work by and large to be more inconspicuous. And they're typically not going to pull people over for minor infractions because it's more risky to do that. You have a car that has fewer lights, and it can pose a more significant traffic hazard than what you're addressing. Nonetheless, if they observe egregious traffic violations, we do expect them to make a stop. And it's always that age-old question, hey, if an unmarked car is trying to stop me, how do I know it's the police, and should I pull over? And the response to that is listen, they're not going to be out at 2 o'clock in the morning in a desolate street stopping you. If that were to happen, I would be suspicious, and you should call in and ask if this is real. And but what is more often the scenario, of course, is you're doing something. I mean, you've violated the law. You just ran through a red light, or huge red light violation, or you're driving really fast, and you are. And there's plenty of people out. The guys driving unmarked cars typically work daytime hours, so you can pull over in a populated area. You're welcome to call in and check, but if the officer feels like that you're evading or refusing to pull over, there's going to be a bunch of marked cars pretty quick. You'll know pretty soon. It's a real police officer, and so. If you know you're doing something wrong, you're speeding, and an unmarked car gets behind you, we don't have makeshift lighting. It's permanent mounted lighting on the cars, and it's a family sedan. It's not a car that you're going to know it's a police car, and so. But again, if you feel uncomfortable, you feel in doubt, then call in and ask if this is real. They're going to be in radio contact with dispatch. So.
Yeah, interesting. Well, another thing I wanted to ask about, I know last week was an odd situation we had. I believe it was one day after the other. We had an escaped convict that kicked a woman's door in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she shoots him dead. With, she had a handgun there, and at home the very next day, a guy was going to rob 3 women, forced them back in their apartment or home, and one of the ladies retrieved a gun, shot him dead. But I wanted to ask you more specifically about people who are legally carrying firearms. What do you? It seems like from an anecdotal situation. It seems like I never hear of somebody who has a carry permit that goes crazy and shoots a bunch of people. But you hear constantly stories about saving their life or shooting a criminal in a burglary situation or something like that. A good guy with a gun that shoots a bad guy. What is your thoughts about that?
Well, to speak to that stuff. This is West Texas, and so by and large, people are going to protect their homes, and we know that on average, more people here carry guns than probably most other places in the country. We always encourage people to know how to use it, to know how to carry it safely, take a class, and also it's more than just anecdotally, sort of empirically. People that have a CHL or have a carry permit now, it's not the CHL anymore. It's not just concealed. Is they've passed a background. They're good, decent people, and this idea that they're going to go crazy and shoot up a place. Well, anything's possible. Anyone can eventually, I guess, break
you don't
bad.
Hear that,
It's incredibly rare. It's good, honest, decent people that have a carry license. It's not something that's overly concerning to us. We appreciate knowing about it if you've been stopped. Let us know. And so,
if you have an interaction with a policeman
absolutely.
And you're carrying, you should tell them that I'm carrying.
That's going to put the officer at ease. It's not. It doesn't. We're then more at ease because we know if you have a CHL, you're not going to be a wanted felon. You're an honest, decent, law-abiding citizen who's probably just driving too fast. Again. It's we're more concerned about the person carrying a gun who doesn't have a license, who hasn't passed that background, who hasn't been to a class. Excuse me. And so, you see stories every now and then, and they're incredibly rare. They make the news more often, or too often that someone did have a license and turned into a criminal, but it's so rare.
Matt, I think we could talk to the chief for another hour. I think we've still got a lot of questions to ask, but we're out of time, and it has been great. Have we covered everything that you wanted to mention? I think
I can talk
talked about.
if you know me, I can go on and on and on. But yeah, absolutely, we talked a lot about stuff. I look forward to coming back at another time.
It's been very interesting this morning. We've had a lot of audience reaction too, so that's great. And thanks for coming out, and we will have you out again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Back with more after this.